Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Betting Pros podcast, brought to you by BetMGM. Use the code BettingPros when you make your first deposit to get up to a $1,000 risk-free bet. I'm Matthew Freedman, Matt at the Oracle, and here with me to talk NFL Week 9 market movement and power ratings is Mr. Power Rank himself, Ed Feng, the proprietor of thepowerrank.com. They've got a great newsletter. Be sure to check that out. And he's also the host of the Football Analytics Show, which Ed, I listen to every week. I have, as you know, I'm something of a podcast power listener.
Yeah,
that's one of the sports betting ones that I always listen to each week. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, it's an honor to put that together and, really try to put some effort into getting some new guests on this fall. Still trying to get more and new guests. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, the episode that you did, I believe it was last week or the week before with Cleve TA. That was a really good one. I mean, they're all good. But I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, thanks. It was really fun getting him on. Had to move some things because he's a busy guy.
Yeah,
he's doing a lot of different things. He talked about it a little bit with his finance career and stuff. But I think that's kind of an example of people I'm trying to bring on. Someone who, has a following, but, I'm not necessarily trying to get him on because of his following to promote myself. Just I really want to see how different people think. Love having you on when we're talking NFL drafts, when we're talking Super Bowl props and trying to get a diversity of views, because I actually think that's the key to betting, the key to fantasy, like getting as many different data sources as possible, putting them together in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, on the idea of, diversity of views, you are a math guy. You've got the statistics background, and that's one way people get into sports betting. Another way people get into sports betting is just, hey, I like sports. I have these thoughts on this game. I think one thing that's cool is that you do have the background to be able to look at numbers and say, okay, well, this number is off for this reason. And so I think there's an edge there. And that's some of the work that you are doing at the Power Rank. Can you talk about your website, the things that people can find there and how it is that you got into sports analytics?
For sure. The Power Rank, I'm trying to make that into the best resource for predictive analytics for people who want to bet on football. The main thing that people come by for is my best predictions. They're available to members of the Power Rank. And again, it's based on this idea that we're not just going to look at play-by-play data and come up with the best prediction. We're not going to just look at that one source. I mean, I try to consult a variety of sources. There's a lot of market data in there. There's obviously the play-by-play because that's an crucial part of bringing it in as well. But also for the NFL, I have a lot of wisdom of crowd metrics that I use as well that are still meaningful at this point in the season. That's not how it started. It was over a decade ago. I was in academia and crying to get out. So I was looking to do something different. And it turned out that I was reading about Google's PageRank algorithm. And that algorithm is based on the same math that I did my PhD in when I was at Stanford. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. We should do something actually useful, like ranking sports teams. And scrape some NFL data together, put together some rankings, spit out some predictions, and send an email to some friends. And people were interested. So I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And things just kind of grew from there. Put together a site, started writing about some things. And it's come a long way. Like over a decade ago, I thought this was more about analytics and content, and pretty quickly realized that people who want to bet on games were the most interested in this. And so the site has evolved to cater to people who want to bet on these games. And it's not just like the primary prediction as well. Try to break down the most important parts of college football and NFL teams. In the NFL, that really means looking at passing statistics a lot more than rushing statistics. And I found that passing success rate is the most predictive of NFL statistics, particularly on offense. Pass defense tends to be less predictive. Defense tends to be less predictive overall in the NFL too, which I think is an important thing to understand. The Cincinnati Bengals were first in my past defensive rankings before this past week and got completely annihilated on Monday night. And it's just one example of it's more difficult to predict defense than it is to predict offense. So the site's come a long way. It's not just margin of victory adjusted for strength of schedule anymore. I'm looking at things like passing success rate, yards per pass attempt, and a lot of other metrics. Anything that I can find that is predictive towards the future, I'm going to try to use it.
So you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned passing success rate, because I was going to ask, out of the sort of play-by-play or, like on-field metrics, what were some of the things that you look at? People look at EPA, they look at yards per play, look at success rate. You found that success rate has the most predictive value out of anything that, and specifically passing success rate.
Yeah, passing success rate on offense is the most predictive statistic I found. I actually just put together a patron-only episode on my podcast about it, and it was some work that I did last year. And, it's more predictive than even EPA, expected points added, that a lot of people use. It's more predictive than yards per pass attempt, which I used for years before getting on the success rate bandwagon. So it's a really important thing. It's not the end all be all of everything either. I've just been thinking, Matt, like, I think I talk about success rate a little bit too much. I kind of need to round out some things, and because it can be a faulty number. Like, I have the Green Bay Packers fourth when I look at adjusted success rate. Yeah. And there's a whole host of reasons why that's too high. We can get into them if you want. But
I'm interested in it. We will talk about market movement, teams that have moved up, down in our power ratings, and I'll say, like, I was very guilty of holding on to my prior on the Green Bay Packers. Far longer into the season than I probably should have. But there were things that you could look at to sort of excuse why their play wasn't measuring up. At the beginning of the season, they were missing their 2 tackles. In week 1, they were without Alan Lazard. They're integrating some rookie wide receivers. Sammy Watkins goes out with a hamstring injury, which, predictable, but still, there are all of these things that pop up that you can sort of contextualize to say, okay, they've underperformed, but I still think the prior has a lot of significant weight because he's Aaron Rodgers and he's in the system, and these other things will right themselves, but they haven't righted themselves, at least not yet. So we can certainly have the conversation about the Packers. You mentioned wisdom of the crowds and bringing that into, or layering that on top of the play-by-play type of analysis that you have. Can you talk a little bit about blending the two?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of different ways. Obviously, there's a market component of what I do, and that's obviously wisdom of crowds in terms of the closing line being a very accurate predictor. In fact, the gold standard of what we can say about predicting these games. Another component where I use wisdom of crowds is in the preseason. So this kind of started when I learned that the preseason AP poll in college sports was a kind of astoundingly accurate predictor. I think this started in college basketball, and Ken Pomeroy and Nate Silver were talking about using the preseason AP poll to predict the tournament, which on the surface just sounds crazy because it has it knows nothing about what happened during the course of the season. And everyone's going to tell you data analytics, like, how do we do that best based on what seems like a sizable sample of 30 some games. It turns out the preseason AP poll, if you just look at tournament games on a neutral site and you just make the simple prediction that the higher ranked team, the preseason AP poll, should beat a lower ranked team. Any ranked team should beat an unranked team. I think it's like 72%, predict 72% of game winners. Something astounding. I did a study in 538 and showed that it was a couple percentage points better than the RPI. So that was the ranking system that the tournament committee used to use. So that was kind of a fun article. So The preseason AP poll is predicted because of wisdom of crowds. No one pollster is going to have the perfect poll, but you put enough of them together and you get a very accurate assessment of team strength, how much talent that these teams have. And that shines through much later in the season. So I started doing that for the NFL, every year. And I grab about 20 subjective power rankings, usually from the major the major outlets, the ESPNs and the Bleacher Reports and of the world, and I actually try to pick stuff that are not calculations. I don't go to Football Outsiders and grab their rankings or anything like that. I try to get stuff that's subjective, in the hopes of getting some kind of in the hopes of getting diversity. And it's the same idea. I'm trying to create a preseason AP poll in the NFL. I found it to be really predictive. I actually did a study this year, like the last couple of years, it's been as good as some preseason metrics I do based on the betting markets, which really should not be true, but it has been over the last 2 years. The data from the win totals, I think, has been better if you look at like 5 years or something like that. The last couple of years, this little really dumb wisdom of crowds model, dumb in the sense, like
simple. Yeah.
I mean, these are just a lot of talking heads that you probably might individually not pay attention to, like someone from the NFL Network saying, actually, I just had this on when I was eating my lunch, like, oh, the Niners are better than the Vikings because I just like the way they're going, stuff like that. Yeah, so people like that. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting from, and the beauty of this is that the wisdom of crowds. You put enough of these together, the errors kind of cancel out, and you get some signal there. And it's a pretty powerful thing that I've used, and I think it just means that like I try to get diversity into my model, and I really try to go for that, and I'm always trying to go for that. That's kind of how I try to improve things every year. One thing I didn't add them in this year, but one thing I'm learning is a lot of people are doing these studies about how much the preseason matters. Preseason data matters in predicting the outcome of the current season. And you can kind of say, oh yeah, well maybe that matters for basketball. Actually, well, it's actually kind of surprising, but there's been some people that have done some work that shown that preseason games, the results in those games, basketball, baseball, football, even football, has some predictive value. I'm not sure how well that worked out this year. I didn't put them in my model, but I did do some calculations on the 3 preseason games that every team played. I actually adjusted for strength of schedule with my algorithm, and I do remember that the Raiders were at the top. So we do need to look at that. We need to look at how things are changing as we go to like fewer preseason games. But I mean, that's something I'm potentially looking to put in my model next year as I can back test and figure out more how accurate it is.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the Raiders for a couple of reasons. The first is that I have a plug that I need to give at some point, so I might as well give it now. It has to do with Josh Jacobs. If you want a chance to win a signed Josh Jacobs Las Vegas Raiders jersey from Pristine Auction, subscribe to the Betting Pros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video, and that's it. We'll announce a winner on the channel, so turn on notifications so you can see when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Okay, so that's the first thing. Needed to get the Josh Jacobs plug out of the way. Dunzo. The number 2 reason why I'm glad you mentioned it is because I would say like obstinately opposed to a lot of people in the preseason whenever they were talking about how great the Raiders were going to be. And I looked at this team. So it's weird. Like they are better actually than I thought they would be, just kind of in some underlying metrics. But they're still, they're not a good team. They're a team that doesn't win football games, and under 8.5 on their season-long win total was one of the strongest positions that I had entering the season. In part because of them, in part because of some quirks with their schedule. I just looked at it and I was like, this feels like a very strong bet here, and unless they really run the table in the second half of the season, it looks like that bet has a very good chance of cashing. But
very good, yeah.
What do you make of the Raiders? Because there are times when they look incredibly competent. And you can sort of see like, okay, they're doing this with the organization. It makes sense. And then last week they go out a big shutout loss on the road against the Saints. What are your thoughts on the Raiders? And it's like how far you have obviously the power rank, you've got rankings, NFL rankings on your site. How much have you adjusted the Raiders from the beginning of the season to where they are right now?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly hasn't been good. I could certainly my case for the Raiders preseason would have been, hey, they added Devontae Adams. I've always liked Derek Carr as a quarterback. Like you have Hunter Renfrow and Waller. Like you have all the ingredients there for a great pass offense. Okay, you have issues on the offensive line. You lost a lot of key people on the defensive side of the ball. I get that, but again, pass offense is the most predictive thing. So that hasn't been the case at all. They started as like a slightly above average team, and they're getting downgraded. Not by a ton. They're below average team now, but. This is, Derek Carr has led when you look at passing success rate over the last couple of seasons, this has been a top 10 unit, top 5 unit, even some seasons. And it's a little bit surprising that they haven't done better. They're 21st when I look at passing success rate adjusted for who you've played. That's a disappointment given the weapons that he's had. And I know Waller was out a couple games, but definitely. They're just not getting it done at this point, right? Like they were supposed to be that 4th team that could really shake it up in a division that looked amazing. And well, a lot of things have happened to that division since the start of the season, right?
Absolutely. So a couple of teams, a few teams that have moved up the most since last week in my power ratings. The Panthers, I had them as the dead last team in my power ratings. Now they're, I think like second to last, but they looked like a team that was just absolutely about to fall apart. They had fired Matt Rule, traded away some pieces. But over the past 2 weeks, this team has played, like they feel a little bit like last year's Lions in that they're out there competing, trying to win, and they are a talent deficient roster, but they are still giving it everything that they have. So I looked at them previously as a team that was just totally dead, and now I have a higher opinion of them. I've also bumped up significantly since last week the Seahawks and the Dolphins. In part, the Dolphins, their offense is starting to click again with Tua at quarterback. They did just make a trade for Bradley Chubb at the trade deadline. In Seattle, I feel like I was maybe, I talked earlier about, holding on to priors. I maybe held on to the prior a little too strongly of Seattle being a bad team. And Geno Smith being not a great quarterback, but he's looked like a great quarterback this year. And so now I'm making that adjustment. Late as it is, I'm making the adjustment of I think Seattle. We have to see if their defense can do for the rest of the season what it's done in the past 2 or 3 weeks. But I'm just kind of making the adjustment of Seattle is not an awful team. Maybe they're around an average team. Those are kind of the bigger moves that I've made since last week. Do you have any thoughts on those teams?
Absolutely. Seattle is definitely one of the teams that I made a move on. Mine is all algorithmic. So it will take data from the current season. It will keep adding it to metrics like yards per pass attempt, passing success rate, both on offense and defense, and it'll make an adjustment. And clearly when you have the results that Seattle did over this past week, it definitely moved them up. When I do things algorithmically, like the one thing that I would note, everything I do gives a team a rating, which is how I produce predictions. In the NFL, the changes are pretty small. So the biggest move was, not even a point. So a team is not going to move a lot any 1 week. And I've actually found that I don't do that anymore in college football because I found that wasn't aggressive enough. I found in college football, I can get more accurate predictions if I make very aggressive adjustments. So, it's not uncommon for a team to go up 2-3 points based on a performance. And I've just found that to be better in terms of the air metrics. In the NFL, I've found that not to be better, although you can certainly make the case that this year is changing everything, as Green Bay and Tampa Bay have certainly not performed like we expected them to this preseason. Philadelphia has just absolutely astounded, I think, anyone who follows this sport. So I don't think there's any right way to do it. I found in the past that things tend to regress in the NFL. Chris Andrews talks about this. He's the manager of the South Point Sportsbook, and he always talks about you can follow momentum in college football, but you'll get crushed following momentum in the NFL. And so far, you might not be getting crushed in the NFL this year if you're following momentum. If you're following these Eagles, if you're willing to lay 14 at Houston on a Thursday night, it might pay off. We should talk about that game, but I think the general approach is interesting, and I think this NFL season in particular in 2022 is pretty interesting because it's breaking some of the rules so far, at least with certain teams.
Yeah. So you are high, or you made a move this week on the Seahawks. You also made a move on the Browns. What are your thoughts on what we saw on Monday Night Football?
Yeah, I mean, what we saw was a big disappointment. I actually just put some futures bets on Cincinnati before that game using some of my metrics and some of the unabated calculators. So that was a disappointment. I actually had the over in that game, which looked like a colossal failure at the end of the first half, but ended up pushing at 45. So that was kind of nice. I think we had seen a lot from Cincinnati in terms of their offense, in terms of getting in the shotgun and a lot of points. I want to say that they just had a bad game on offense, or what else was interesting? Like, Jamar Chase, like the news that he was out didn't really move the total or the side that much.
Yeah, it didn't.
And I think you can. I want to say, hey, well, that total should have gone up, so it really should have closed 46. That's what I think. And it didn't because Jamar Chase means a point or something like that, right? I thought that was interesting. I think I will stick with Cincinnati. Probably had a bad game here, and Cleveland had a really good game here. Obviously, Cleveland gets the benefit of the doubt. They are the other big mover that I wrote down for this past week. But I certainly don't think that means the end for Cincinnati. And this is a team that, like, I was just making fun of all throughout their Super Bowl run last year, how they're not that good, yada, yada, yada. And now, after a rough start to the season, they've been pretty good over the last couple games. They were actually first, like I was mentioning, they were first in my passing success rate adjusted for opponent. And that's too high. They're not the best pass defense in the NFL. That's just not a true statement. But yeah, I think we saw that a little bit.
Yeah. They're definitely not the best pass defense after losing cornerback Chidobe Awuzie. He's out for the year with an ACL tear. And honestly, the Jamar Chase injury, like, I try not to react too much to any one player being out with injury. But Chase, he's a really important part of what they do on offense. He opens everything up for everyone else. And, with his yak ability, any given reception, he can turn into a long touchdown. And so they are the team, the Bengals, that I have downgraded the most from last week. I've knocked them down a full point. And Houston as well, the Texans. Like, they feel like a team that is just dying. And the thing is, and we'll talk about Thursday Night Football, even with knocking them down a full point from last week to this week, I'm not getting anywhere close to 14, So it's like, part of me just feeling like I need to knock them down more. Like, I need to like approach this market number to make my overall power ratings a little more representative of reality. But those are the two teams that I've really knocked down. And then the Rams, not quite as much as the Texans and the Bengals, but still a significant amount from last week. I thought what they showed against the 49ers was pretty disappointing. They looked good in the scripted portion of the game, but at the end, they did not respond in the second half, and they just got absolutely boat raced. So the Texans, the Bengals, the Rams, thoughts on the moves down for those teams?
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with anything that you're saying. I definitely want to chime in on the Rams because I actually love the fact that I had Rams plus 1.5 at home against San Francisco. Got some massive line movement as the Rams ended up favored by 1 or 1.5. I don't even know where it closed at most places. You pat yourself on the back. They're up early in the first half. They're up in the second half, and then it just all fell apart. And kudos to the Niners. The Rams were a team that I was kind of making fun of towards the end of the playoffs last year too. I remember when they played Arizona, I was like, these teams both suck, right? This is whoever wins this game is not going to go that far. And obviously they played their best football in the playoffs and won the Super Bowl. But I think we're kind of seeing that, they have some problems, and maybe they may get it back together, but a downgrade on the Rams is certainly justified after what we saw.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's any other teams here? You mentioned the Packers earlier in the show. I suppose it's worth talking about them from the beginning of the season to now. Do you know how far they have fallen in your rating? So to put some numbers to this, the Rams have dropped the farthest in my ratings, 4.25 points. After them, the Colts, part of that is tied to benching Matt Ryan, but there's also been significant underperformance there. I have the Steelers down 3.5 points. Can't forget the Broncos down 3.75 points. For me, I guess I'm still holding probably a little bit stronger to the prior than I should. Both the Buccaneers and the Packers are down 2.5 points for me from where I had them to start the year. Where are they for you?
Yeah, not quite as much. I've certainly downgraded on Green Bay, but it looks like about 1.5. And part of that is the passing success rate stuff that I was telling you about before. Yeah. That's one of the biggest. I mean, it is the biggest part that comes from the play-by-play data, and they actually look pretty good on both sides of the ball. Of course, one metric doesn't capture everything, and when you look at a little bit more of their explosiveness, when you look at yards per pass attempt, they're much more NFL average there, and you can certainly see why that's the case, right? I mean, with all the not having Devontae Adams, losing Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard didn't play this past week as well. Aaron Jones is by far the most explosive threat in the passing game. And that, he's a great player as well. So I did a pretty deep dive into Green Bay this week. And when you look at points they've scored, they're like 26th in the NFL. They're not that bad on offense. A lot of things have happened such that they just haven't scored as many points. So, example, in the game against the Bills on Sunday night, they had almost 400 yards of offense.
Yeah.
A lot of that was explosive plays in the running game in the second half. And we're a little unlucky to score only 17 points. They failed on 2 fourth downs in Bills territory. So things like that they haven't been scoring as many points as their underlying metrics suggest. Now, can we make the case that this is a top 5 offense? Absolutely not, right? I mean, they're somewhere near the fat part of the middle in the NFL. But, is there potentially some value with the Packers? I think so, especially since they're playing what I think over the last 2 years has been the worst pass defense in the NFL, and that would be the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
There's been nothing good about them, even with the issues that the Packers have at the receiver position. I think they're going to have success against a really poor secondary. I also thought, a lot of things have been made about Aaron Rodgers and the thumb and whether that's been an issue. From the game on Sunday night, I can't say that I thought it was an issue. I didn't think he was really off on any of his throws. I actually thought he was pretty decent. He doesn't have the weapons downfield that he would like, but I mean, maybe it's an issue, or maybe it was an issue 2 weeks. I'm not sure that it's an issue. I think the Packers are like maybe a slightly better than average NFL offense, which is better than the points per game suggests at this point.
All right, well, let's get into talking about some of the market. I'm looking at our BettingPros odds page right now. And, I didn't have it on the outline, but you just talked about Green Bay there. And that's an interesting line to me, right? So in the look ahead, it was 3.5. And we see the Lions this weekend. We see the Packers. And it opens at 3.5. It's as if like the bookmakers, like they set the line at 3.5, expecting to move one direction or the other when they reopened on Sunday. And instead they were just like, you know what, we're just sticking with the 3.5. Market, you tell us what to do. And this morning it was at 3, and now across the board it is back to 3.5.
That's good.
What are your thoughts on this line here and the movement that we've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I bet Green Bay -3 this morning, so I'm pretty pleased that it got off 3 already.
Yeah.
I mean, the Lions trade away TJ Hawkinson, which is probably their second most important weapon at the skill position. So I don't believe in the Detroit Lions team. I'd like to living here in Ann Arbor, but I just don't. And particularly, I don't think that defense and the secondary is good. And the Packers aren't good, but they're better than they seem. And I think having gone pretty deep, I believe that to be true. And I know their fans don't think that, but they're not as bad as I think they're being portrayed as right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I have gotten in trouble for that because I really liked them against the Jets a couple weeks ago, which was the disaster. But yeah. I like them against the Lions.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, the Colts is a team that I've downgraded quite a bit in the power ratings, and I'm looking at Colts at Patriots. And in the off season, right, you'll have sports books that put lines out way in advance for all of the NFL games, and they don't take a lot of money on those. So there's always a question as to how accurate, how predictive are those numbers. At the same time, you have professional bookmakers who are hanging these lines, and there are people who are betting them. So there is some value there. And so this line for the Colts at the Patriots in the offseason, this was a pick 'em. On the look ahead, it was 6. The early line was 6.5, and now it's been bet down to 5.5. So, we've gone from pick 'em to 6.5 to 5.5 here. I think, going towards the Colts, that feels like the correct direction. At the same time, Sam Ehlinger, we're talking about a 6th round quarterback who now has one start to his name, and a team that just fired their offensive coordinator.
Right.
I say, like, the number that I generate can say that the Colts is the right side. At the same time, can I see how they lose by 20? Like, yeah, I could see how something like that happens. What are your thoughts on this line here?
Yeah. So when I run my model, I have New England by about 3, but obviously that considers the Colts with what we expected Matt Ryan to do and Matt Ryan as the quarterback. That's clearly not the case. One of the things that I try to do to distinguish quarterbacks is to look at the markets and to see how the markets have adjusted. And you can, you essentially look at all the closing spreads and you count different quarterbacks differently. And you look at how you adjust for who you've played with my algorithm. And then you can kind of get an estimate for how much worse a quarterback is. So you have to make an adjustment for Ehlinger and this is tough, right? Because the market's had one crack at saying how good the Colts are with Ehlinger. But with Ehlinger, with that one game, my market model would make New England about a 5-point favorite, which is pretty consistent with what we're seeing in the market. It seems about right to me. I mean, Mac Jones comes back first full game, and I think Mac Jones is good. So, when he's going to get some more games under his belt, for them to be 5-point favorite, they're on the road, right? No, they're actually at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Patriots at home.
I think 5.5, 6 makes complete sense here.
Yeah, I have this at 5.25. I grabbed it at 6.5, so I'm maybe a little bit biased in my perception of, hey, I think the Colts look great here. The line should keep on moving towards the Colts.
Yeah.
Okay, Bills at Jets. I mean, oh man, this number. I mean, we will see when it really starts to get some resistance here. But in the offseason, this number was 7. It makes a lot of sense. In the look ahead, it's 10.5. It opens at 12.5. And I am looking now at our odds page here. At BetMGM, this number is 13 right now.
Right.
I mean, it could easily get to 14. Like we can see how it gets there.
Yeah.
The Bills, they didn't cover on Sunday Night Football. Before that, they were covering large spreads, and they were covering that number for a large chunk of the game. The Jets have lost some key players. Despite Zach Wilson's 300-yard passing performance, he didn't look all that good this past week. And no Breece Hall, no Elijah Vera Tucker, who's the best run blocking offensive lineman that they had. I think that Jets offense could really struggle against a Bills defense that, if it's not the best in the league, top 3 for sure. Where do you see this line going, and what do you think of the movement we've seen so far?
Yeah, I mean, my number is Bills by about 10. That's too low. Obviously, part of the reason is that I have the Jets in the top 5 in terms of pass defense, which is too high. They've faced a string of backup and rookie quarterbacks. So, for example, when they played Miami, they faced backup quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, who got hurt after, I think, a single pass attempt. Mm-hmm. And Skylar Thompson the rookie played the rest of that game. So that's how we're evaluating, the Jets there. The Bills came into the season as a Super Bowl favorite, and they've done nothing but play like a Super Bowl favorite. Yeah. So, you mentioned their defense. Yeah, I don't think their defense gets enough credit at all. They're probably missing their best or second best player in Tre'Davious White, the cornerback.
Yeah,
they've looked awesome, and so yeah. I mean, I'm not, the Bills also seem to have this sense about them that they try to go out and they try to score a lot of points. And so it seems like, if you want, I mean, I'm not betting the Bills here. I think the spread is big enough that would keep me away from it. But it's a type of team that does tend to cover these big spreads. You mentioned the injuries for the Jets. At a couple weeks ago, Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, I think, had the most targets on that team, like the 2 rookies. Yeah. Right? And now one of them's hurt, and they got all kinds of other issues at receivers. I'm not sure Zach Wilson is all that good. Some
people might be sure that he is not good. Some people might be strongly on the other side of that. Yeah.
Well, but then you have the other people that what have they won, like 5 in a row now or something like that, or 4-1?
Yeah, recently? 4-1 in their last 5. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's their Zach Wilson statistic, right?
Right.
The guy comes back and they're winning football games.
It's good to be a winner. I mean, it's better than losing. It's better than sucking and losing. But he has not looked good. Another game I want to get your thoughts on: Seahawks at Cardinals. This to me is such an intriguing game here. So in the offseason, this number was 6.5, 7 towards the Cardinals. On the look ahead market last Thursday, it was 3.5. And I got to say, to me, that was like an auto bet. That was just like a snap bet right there. Because I just thought, regardless, on the Seahawks. Yeah.
Got it.
And so I just thought kind of almost regardless of what happens, like I had my number, but I felt this is not going to be 3.5. Like that number will not be available. Get it now. And it opened on Sunday night at 2.5. Pretty quickly went down to 1.5. And as we are talking right now, that number is it was 1 earlier, and then it's met some resistance, and now it is back up to 2. Mm-hmm. So it looks like we've reached that like market equilibrium point of where that number probably should be. But what do you think about this number here?
Yeah, I mean, this is a game that I've made Arizona as about a 3-point favorite. I would lean that way. They did get DeAndre Hopkins back recently. And again, we're looking at a small sample size, right? So Seattle, Geno Smith, he's been great. I'm looking at my passing success rate, and they're 11th after I adjust for opposition. I'm gonna say that's probably too high, right? I mean, can he elevate this pass offense to the league average? Yeah, I think he can. I mean, should he be knocking on the door of a top 10 pass offense? I'm not convinced about that. So between these two things, I would definitely lean towards Arizona here.
Yeah,
and that's the way you have seen the market move today. Yeah, I saw the Arizona -1 earlier today as well.
Yeah, and it met resistance there. And so I have this projected. You have it projected around -3. I have it projected around -1. The market is at -2. That seems about right. Like all seems right with the world there. Okay, Titans at Chiefs. I don't know, Ed, how you tend to feel about, like, oh, I should have just grabbed this number. I didn't grab it. Like now it's gone. And, you don't seem like the kind of person who hates yourself about stuff like that. But, right. There are times when I look at something, I'm just like, oh man, I should have grabbed that number. And this is one of those instances where in the offseason, looking at Titans at Chiefs, this number was -6. With the Chiefs favored. In the look-ahead market, it was 10.5, the same as Buffalo. And with Buffalo, I had this sort of like thought of there's no way, regardless of what happens, unless there's a Josh Allen injury, there's no way this number gets down to 10 because it would just meet sudden resistance and a decent chance it moves in the opposite direction. And that was right. I didn't have that same thought here with the Chiefs, and I absolutely should have. So, it was 10.5 in the look ahead market. It opened at 11. It is now 12.5 at most books here. And I mean, I don't know. I could see it going to 13.5. 14 would still not surprise me. Although, like, Mike Vrabel is an underdog. That's not someone I tend to want to bet against when he's in that situation. And, Malik Willis threw the ball just 10 times against Houston, although I imagine that Ryan Tannehill will come back for this game. And I'm imagining that has to be baked into the number here. But this number has moved a lot. Yeah, go ahead. Well,
what do you think it is? I mean, this number getting that high suggests to me that Tannehill might not play.
If Malik Willis is playing in this game, if he is the starting quarterback in this game, man, like I think this number has to be like 17.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it has to be high. And again, like Tennessee was playing Houston last week. They were up. And they asked the rookie to throw it 10 times. He will have to throw it more than 10 times because it's very likely that they're going to be down later in the game against the Kansas City Chiefs. So, 17. I can't see it getting that high, but I hear what you're saying. Like it's at least 14, if not more, if we find out that Willis is going to start this game. And
So you think that there is within this line that we see right now, maybe some uncertainty about who is starting for the Titans this week?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if Tannehill were playing, I would make this 8.5. I think that seems a little bit low. You're going to give the Kansas City a little bit of credit. So I think, Kansas City -10 seems about right if we knew that Tannehill was playing. So to me, this seems the market's hedging a little bit and the fact that Willis might be in there. What was Tannehill's injury? He had like an ankle or something?
Ankle and then illness.
Okay.
So the illness at the end of the week, it seemed like that was the thing that was sort of like the nail in the coffin of like, okay, he's not playing this week. But, even though he didn't practice on Wednesday and Thursday with the ankle injury, it seemed like he was trending towards playing, like wasn't going to practice, but would gut it out and play. So I think he probably plays this week, but man, it will be interesting to see because the Titans, they're one of those kind of squirrely teams as underdogs to where like you never know. Like
never know.
I mean, they've upset the Chiefs before. They've done it before. All right,
they had a big upset of the Bills last year too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean they were the number 1 seed last year for reasons unbeknownst to mankind, but known to the gambling gods. They were the number 1 seed. All right, Thursday Night Football. This game is unreal. We've got the Eagles at the Texans, and it's not like anyone was respecting the Texans before the season started.
Nope.
But this number was 5.5 in the offseason, 9.5 on the look ahead number. And again, this is just one of those situations where you're like, I look at how much this number has moved and I'm like, you know what? I'm a little bit upset with myself for not betting it when I saw like, hey, there's probably some opportunity here. At the same time, I don't want to be the person who's betting massive favorites. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I got to have some principles somewhere. And this is the arbitrary line where I decide to have some principles. But I mean, 9.5 in the look ahead market, 13 in the early lines. I mean, it's 13.5 in the market now. It feels like there's a pretty good chance this number gets to 14. 13.5, actually, 13.5 at BetMGM, 14 right now at DraftKings, 14 at PointsBet. Man, what are you doing with this game? Because I will say, I am showing theoretical value on the Houston Texans here, and there is no way I want to bet on them. If it gets to 14, I might think about it. But in terms of like the power ratings, I have this projected at 11.5. And, in theory, that's enough value to bet on the Texans. But you get to a certain point in the season where teams just start tanking. They start rotating players in to give, backups a chance to see if those guys can be contributors in the future. They start experimenting with different schemes just to see. It's like, you start the gap between the great teams and the horrible teams starts to widen in the second half of the season. And I think we are at that point. And so although I'm seeing theoretical value on the Texans, man, I don't know if I have the fortitude to bet on them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I see, again, theoretical value on the Texans, but I would not bet this. I mean, you can kind of make the case, Philadelphia has been great. Jalen Hurts has been good. They're league average and passing success rate adjusted for opponent. They're 16th. So, but they are winning football games, and Houston is not a good football team. They're right near the bottom of the NFL. Again, I probably should run my college football model, the one that's more aggressive, and to see where they would put this line. I think it would definitely be in double digits. But I know that kind of model doesn't apply as much to the NFL. Mm-hmm. The NFL tends to be, again, I try not to follow momentum in the NFL. You got to break rules sometimes, and this might be one of those cases. So it's a tough one, but who knows? I mean, maybe the Thursday night curse of no points will come, and it'll be hard to cover 2 touchdowns.
I mean, that is true. If there are a few points scored, it is easier for the underdog to cover, especially when it's such a massive number. Where's the breaking point for you? So let's say it's 13.5 now, 14 at a couple of books out there. Maybe you're not grabbing it at 14. Yeah. If it hits 14.5, are you like, okay, 14.5. Now that I've got the hook upon the hook, now I'm doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, but right, because it's better, you have to be able to bet any team at some number.
Yeah.
Let's say 14 and a half. Let's say 14. Let's say 14.
We'll see.
Maybe 15. I was going to say 15. You talked me into 14 and a half, though.
Man, it might get to 14 and a half. We've got a couple of days before Thursday. It actually might get there. All right, Ed, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. Power Rank. Give us one more plug on it and anything else you want to talk about. I know you've got a newsletter that you do.
Yeah, no, I've been really proud of the newsletter. I started doing something called 7 Nugget Saturday about a year ago. It comes out Saturday. It's just, small little tidbits, whether they be bets or news, injury report. Try to put in a little humor there. I've been trying to ramp it up a little bit this season, asking some friends of mine that are pro sports bettors for little tips in there as well. Some of them have agreed to help me out with that. So it's something that I've been proud to do. It's like a curation of other things out there. And I think there's a wide variety of things to try to, this time of year, try to put some NBA stuff in there. We'll try to include some baseball when the time is appropriate. So yeah, just part of my email newsletter. I also talk about games that I bet and the reasons why in terms of my metrics. So you can check that out at thepowerrank.com.
All right, Ed, awesome. Thanks for joining the show. That is going to do it for the Week 9 edition of the Power Ratings and Market Movement episode. I'm Matt Freedman. Everyone have a great day.